let's talk about the economic questions. And Josh, let's turn the lights off if you would, please. Here we go. So these are the basic economic questions that every nation in the world is going to be responsible to answer in one way or another. Depending upon their particular viewpoint of the economy, they're going to answer these in their own way, but they are going to have to be answered. So we begin here with the output question. What are we going to produce is the main idea here. What is going to be put out of our economy? What is going to be put into the world? So we call that the output type question. And keeping in mind that all of our resources are scarce. You know, if we had our donut shop set up on the corner of 26 and 550, we would love to be able to produce an endless amount of donuts because for every donut we produce, we make money. And no matter what business we are going to look at, whether it's a computer company, whether it is Uber, you know, we want to be able to make sure that we are providing as much as we possibly can. So we, at the same time, have to keep in mind that our resources are scarce, but yet people have limitless wants. So trying to figure out exactly what types of goods we're going to produce is an important part of this question. And this question is really answered, or is discussed on both a micro and macroeconomic level. So we're hitting on a little bit of both here. When we are considering what types of goods need to be produced, there are really two options economically that we could consider. First one are consumer goods. Now, consumer goods are going to be items that are bought for personal use and that are going to be used right away. Most of the things that we walk in and purchase at Walmart, or we buy on Amazon, or we see that perfect donut sitting up there on the shelf at the donut shop, those are consumer goods. So we're going to take those things, we're going to use them immediately. They are ready for use. So, as a nation, we could choose to focus on just producing consumer goods. We want to make toothbrushes, we want to make computers, we want to make donuts, we want to make pizzas. Those are consumer goods. We could put all of our focus and attention on those things. Or we could look at capital goods. Capital goods are items that are going to be purchased to make the consumer goods. Capital goods are items that are purchased in order to make the consumer goods. So what type of things are we looking at here if we're talking about capital goods? What's going to be used to make a consumer good? Give me an example. Nathan? Machinery. Okay. What else? I don't know that I would put them into capital goods here, because even though they are producing the consumer goods, we are looking at what we are producing. So we are actually building the machine to make the consumer goods. So I don't know that I want to put employees in there.
Natural resources.
Okay, natural resources. Yeah, we could consider trees or water or even minerals that we're harvesting out of our lands as part of the capital goods, and then we're going to sell those off to somebody else. Anybody else think of an example? Those are the big ones. Okay, steel being one of those things that we are going to produce in order for somebody else to make something as a consumer good. So think about capital goods as like the behind the scenes stuff that somebody's got to make. Anybody ever toured through a factory and seen them putting together some of these capital goods? So my hometown, Waterloo, Wisconsin, it is tiny, all right, really, really small. They have two major factories in that town. First one is Van Holten Pickles. You drive by there in the summertime and you will smell the wafting of pickles, the wafting scent and aroma of pickles throughout the main street of town. And they have these massive vats of pickles brining and pickling sitting outside of their factory. And I mean, they are probably the size of this room. 10, 12 feet tall. big around, and they have many of these sitting out there in the front of their factory. Somebody had to make that vat in order for them to put all the pickles and the juices and everything that they use to make that. The other major factory that they have in my hometown is Trek bicycles. And no, not Star Trek. Good try, though. They have Trek bicycles in this town. Again, small town. There's like 5,000 people live in this town, maybe not even that many. It might even be less than that. Two major factories. We walked through, we took a tour through the Trek Bicycle Company a number of years back. This was before Lance Armstrong became who we know Lance Armstrong to be now. It was back when he was still winning Tour de France's and he was still like the poster child for Trek. So we walk in there and he has autographed and donated 2 of his Tour de France bicycles to this tiny little plant that he actually won on the final day, and it was photographed, and he's got them in there. He had visited that plant multiple times, never when I was there, and I never saw him in town, but he had been there multiple times. And so we toured through, and there's all these machines that are moving bikes from one place to another. Well, those would be some of those capital goods that are helping Trek Bicycle be able to make the consumer goods that we then go out and we buy the bicycle and ride around town. So it's important to know the difference here between consumer and capital goods. Is it wise for a country to focus in on one of those items? If we are going to be just focused on capital goods, is that a wise economic choice? What do you think? Charlie says no. Anybody want to jump on ship with Charlie here? Agree with him? Yeah. Looks like you're kind of driving the ship by yourself. How about consumer goods? Would that be a better option? Should we just produce consumer goods? How many say we need a mixture of both? Yeah, it's okay. Hey, I'm not going to judge you if you put your hand up on the wrong side. It's okay. All right, it depends on your economy. So Charlie, why would you say it would be good for a country to focus on capital goods alone?
I thought you were asking if it was good to focus on one set or just as one set.
Oh, okay. So you misunderstood my question. I could see some nations, though, focusing just on capital goods. And that's all they're going to do. Can you think of an example or think of why that might be a wise option for them to do?
If they just focused on capital goods, they could trade with other countries.
Precisely.
For consumer goods.
Yes. So let's just say that you are a country that is up to your eyeballs in bananas. Well, I guess that would be consumer good, wouldn't it? Coffee beans. All right, coffee beans could be a consumer good, but they could also be a capital good. If you're going to sell them to coffee shops and then they're going to transform them into that wonderful liquid gold that comes out of their machines. Okay, so they have all of this natural resource that they're going to harvest and they're going to make and they're going to sell off to somebody else, or they're going to trade for the consumer goods that they want. It could be that that particular country doesn't have the resources in order to be able to make their own consumer goods. So therefore, it'd be better for them to focus on just capital goods, trade, and get the consumer goods that they want. And it can work the other way. It could be that a country, they have the manpower to make a whole lot of the consumer goods, but yet they don't have the natural resources to be able to make the capital goods. So that's why international trade, think back to one of the first days that we had in this class where we traded those bags of, some of you got stickers and some of you got nerds and some of you got class passes and those type of things. You traded for something you wanted because of the fact that there was something else somebody had or you thought you might get a better opportunity. So countries are going to find the right balance for them in determining how much of the consumer goods we're going to focus on, how much of the capital goods should we focus on. Excuse me. And sometimes it is better for them just to focus on one and then trade for what they don't have. It's really here a trade-off in this decision process. Because for most countries, they're not going to be able to focus on one alone. They're not going to be able to focus on just one capital good. they are going to have to find the right balance. And so we talk about trade-off when we are dealing with that. What's the right balance? Who's going to make that decision? You know, let's say that you have a whole bunch of let's think, you have the ability, let's use Charlie's example of iron or steel, and you just keep making it and producing it and producing it and producing it. And you got so much you don't know what to do with, and it's just piling up. Well, at some point, you're not going to be able to use all of that for your own people. But yet you have an abundance of it. I think about even the northeastern United States when they first started colonization with the British started colonization and they started to harvest all the trees. Well, they had more than they could ever use to build their log cabins here, so they started selling it off to other countries. But how much of that should they consume? How much of that should they sell off? So if we're going to look at the command solution, this is how they're best going to answer this question. They're going to have some sort of committee or an authority decide what combination is best. Should we focus on capital or consumer goods? The viewpoint here is that it's too important of a decision to allow the uninformed, the common consumer, to make this decision. So therefore, we as the national authorities are going to make this decision for the people. A lot of times we think of command economy as, oh man, I wouldn't want to live there because somebody's telling me what to do. However, when we really start to pull it apart and we start to look at what questions they're trying to answer, sometimes it does make sense that you have some expert in their field making this decision. They're also concerned here that too much savings could cause unemployment. How would that happen? Too much savings in your savings account. Like you decide you're not going to spend money, you're just going to keep it for yourself. How would that cause unemployment? What do you think?
If you aren't buying other people's goods, then they're going to go out of business, and then there will be a larger number of unemployed.
Circular flow. Okay, that's why we drew that diagram. And it's important for people to spend money for the economy to thrive. So if everybody's hoarding their money and everybody stops spending, we just keep saving, saving, saving. I need to move that. Then we're going to stop the circulation and the flow of money. So that's one of the concerns, and that's why the command economists will say, we need to make sure that that money keeps circulating to keep our economy healthy. So we're going to make the decision here rather than leave it up to the people. Now, we look at the market solution. To answering the question, what is going to be produced? And they are going to use interest rates to control the money flow. This is not necessarily the time to get into interest rates and how that affects everything, but I will tell you right now, interest rates are climbing in the United States. So when you look at your savings account, most savings accounts get around 1% interest, just in a generic savings account. But let's say that your interest rate jumped to some astronomical level, like 10% on your savings account. What's that going to encourage you to do? Save money, put more money into that because you're going to earn more money out of that. But interest rates across the board will rise. So what that also means is that when a bank is loaning money to you, let's say to buy a home or buy a car, those interest rates are also going to be high. Because of the circular flow just within the bank, they are paying you a huge sum of money for your savings account. They need to get that money from somewhere else, so when you come to borrow to buy a car or buy a house, they're going to charge you a lot more interest. It works the opposite. When interest rates are low in your savings account, oftentimes interest rates are low in the ability to borrow money. So that's how it kind of helps keep people from either saving or going out and buying. If they put low interest rates out on buying cars, More people are going to hopefully go out and buy cars because they're not going to be charged as much money to buy that car. So they allow those interest rates to control the money flow, and it affects how many businesses or individuals borrow. It affects how households save their money. So, biggest connection I'd like for you to make here, when we're answering the question of what are we going to produce, the command solution to that is we have some authority, some individual, or some committee make that decision. Market solution, they play with the interest rates. Make those connections there. Okay, everybody follow me? Cool. Let's move on to question 2. Input question. How are the nation's goods going to be produced? And we then have 2 options. We can either invest more in labor or more in equipment. And as we begin to examine this question here, we are generally looking here at a macro view. We're looking at big picture, looking at nations, but it could also be applied to micro as well. If we're going to focus on labor-intensive approach, that's where we're going to have a lot of human labor involved, lots of people employed in our economy. They're going to be doing the task by hand. They're going to be doing the labor themselves. Not as much real capital. In real capital, we're talking about machinery here. We're talking about automation. So, do you think they're going to have high or low unemployment? Going to have low unemployment in these type of countries. Almost everybody is going to have work if you want it. If the country is labor intensive, if we are going to produce our goods with the hands of human people, then there's always going to be work out there. One of the advantages of this is you can cross-train your workers. So I worked through college. One of my jobs was to work in a furniture shop. We custom built high-end cabinetry and office furniture. So these were all made out of solid wood. Many times they were stained or painted. Sometimes they had elaborate lighting systems. My favorite piece was the one that had the flat screen TV that rose up out of the desk. And we built those type of things. Those were monster heavy to try to load on a truck. But we built this custom furniture, super expensive stuff. But it was all handmade. Well, I shouldn't say all handmade. But we assembled it. We did a lot of the work ourselves. And it was an assembly line type of setup. So that way, my department was the finishing touches. So I worked in finishing and hardware. So we would put on the handles. We would add some of the little detail work. And then my job was to insert glass. So I was the glass guy. And we had some very intricate cuts that we had to do. It wasn't just cut straight lines. Sometimes we had to do arches, and we had to do diagonal cuts, and we had to do all kinds of things, which I had no clue how to do glass before I started working there. No clue how to cut it. And so they started me off there. I worked pretty efficiently, and I started getting ahead to where I didn't have any work to do. I was just sitting there waiting. Okay, give me something with some glass to cut. I'd go around, I'd start sweeping up behind people, and I was kind of bored. And they said, okay, let's try to train you on some other things. They called it cross-training. So that way I could go in and I could help somebody else that's backed up, maybe on assembling the doors or putting the hardware on, or some of those other type of things. So I went over and I started training with 3 or 4 other different people. And because of my hours, and they worked with me through college, that I could come in before the normal morning shift started, and I would see somebody's backed up. I could go back there. I could help them push through 3 or 4 units. So then they came in at 6:30. I already had several done where I had finished that up. Or at the end of the day, if they were behind, I could do some of that. So I was kind of the cross-trained guy. Well, if we had automated machines, that's not going to happen. You can't take a machine and retrain it to do a different task. So this is one of the advantages, one of the reasons why some countries focus in on labor-intensive, is because they can also focus in on more flexibility in how they meet their demand. when certain things change that are outside of their control, they have more flexibility by using human labor than if they had all of this automated and machinery. In this particular scenario, when we're dealing with labor-intensive output here, or input, I should say, you've got to pay for your equipment either way. You've got to pay for your employees. You've got to pay for whatever capital resource you have. So you're going to be continually paying those employees day in and day out. On the flip side, we could focus on a capital-intensive input. So in this particular case, we're going to have a lot of automated equipment, less human labor. Some advantages here is that we are not going to have huge payrolls. We're not going to have as many employees that we've got to pay. And when you think about the costs of health insurance, you think about all of the vacation time that you have to give your employees, minimum wage continues to go up. This may be a huge advantage right here. When you're thinking about your company, you're thinking about the way that the nation is going to produce its products. There are no hidden costs associated with you would see with an employee. I mentioned just a couple of those, things like insurance benefits, vacation time, Social Security taxes, all those type of things that you have to pay, even workers' compensation is stuff that you as an employer are going to have to take care of. Don't have to worry about discontented employees. I've never been part of a strike. Hope that I don't ever have to be. I've had some friends that have gone through that. They didn't have an option because they were part of a labor union. Labor union voted to go on strike. My friend was against it, but because of the fact he was a member of it, they had to go on strike. So he was out of work for a couple of weeks while they were trying to figure that out. It also meant that the plant in the factory was not able to work. No employee needs to be met here, so you don't have to have a break room. You don't have to provide lunchtime off. You don't have to worry about injuries and that type of thing when you're dealing with automated equipment. You have a constant rate of productivity. You guys could tell me all about this. There are certain times of the year where you're working a whole lot more efficiently than others, isn't there? This week's a hard week, isn't it? Yeah. You're like, man, I got February break coming up. I don't want to take a test on Wednesday. I'm praying for snow, both Wednesday and Friday. That way we can delay the test to after we come back. Yeah. Constant rate of productivity. I know I see this in myself. When I get to a certain part of the night, when it gets past 10 o'clock at night, and I'm still working on school stuff, or when I was writing papers, if I got past 10 o'clock, I would see my productivity begin to decline the later in the night it went. I know some of you are great at pulling the all-nighter stuff. That was not me. I could not do that. Needed that automated system to be able to write my papers for me. So here's the solution. If we're running a command economy, and they're trying to answer the question, do we go with more labor-intensive, more capital-intensive? It's going to really depend on the economy and depend on the person who's in charge. So some countries here are going to focus on simple unemployment. That's all they care about. They want to make sure that they have low unemployment numbers. So therefore, if you want low unemployment numbers, are you going to go labor-intensive or capital-intensive? Labor-intensive, for sure. Even if it means you're going to be working less efficiently, even if it means it's going to cost the country more, you can brag about, we have low unemployment. Doesn't necessarily mean that the nation is prosperous, though. In the market solution here, market solution is going to allow every company to make its own decisions in this case. So if you want to have an automated system making your donuts, go for it. If you want to have people hand crafting those donuts every single morning, then that is your decision in a market economy. Ultimately, you're going to look to see what is going to be most efficient, what is going to save you the most money. Look at your production costs. While it may not be fun to lay off employees, sometimes that's the way you need to go in order to be able to make your business thrive. Because you want to choose a mix that allows maximum profit at lowest cost. I know sometimes that's a difficult thing if you're the employee to hear. I've been replaced by a machine. But we also understand that's part of how the economic process works. There are many jobs, and maybe some of you have family stories, that existed even 10 or 15 years ago that don't exist anymore because computers have taken over that job. A couple weeks ago, we had a phone book dropped off at our door. Logan said to me, "Dad, what's that?" I said, "It's something you'll never read." He said, "It's a phone book." I said, "What's it for?" And I said, "Well, it's in case you want to look up somebody's phone number that lives in town or a business that has their phone number in this book in town." He's like, "Wouldn't we look that up on your phone?" I said, "Yep." Trash can. So just makes me think about some of the things that have changed here. Our distribution question here. Who's going to receive the products that we make? Who's going to receive these products? Going to answer questions like this. Should the rich people get more than the poor? Well, it depends on your vantage point on that. If you're rich, you're going to say yes. If you're poor, you're going to say no. If you're kind of in the middle, you're going to listen to both sides. Should the intelligent get a larger portion than the ignorant? Or what about your age? Should that matter? So here's something that's often hard to deal with when you get into the workforce. You graduate college and you start that dream job that you've always wanted. And you find out that you are going to start off at X amount of dollars in your salary, and you were looking at the numbers, your college advisor maybe told you, you could make up to this amount, and here's where you're starting. Sometimes it's kind of a hard realization to get to. You got to work your way up in order to do that. Yet, you've got the guy that's been working there for 25 years. He should be making more money than the rookie. I often see this in the NFL or NBA. The contract disputes and negotiations they deal with, and these rookies come in and they demand a huge salary. Well, you haven't done anything yet. Do something first, and then let the company pay you. It's really a question here of who should get the nation's money in the circular flow model. Okay, so that's what the question is trying to be answered. So as we move forward here and try to answer that, the command solution to this is usually we're going to try to close that gap between the wealthy and the poor. Because we want everybody to be happy. We want everybody to be equal. Brings up this term called egalitarian fairness. Egalitarian fairness is the belief that every single one of us are part of the human race. We're all in this life together. So because we're all in this together, we should all help each other. We should all have an equal portion of the nation's wealth together, regardless of our contribution. So we're all in this together. We all are part of the same economy. So therefore, everybody should have the same result, or everybody should have the same amount of income, a share of the nation's wealth, simply because we were born into it. Now, brings up the term economic leveling, is where we're going to equally distribute everybody's income regardless of your contribution to the economy. Robin Hood might have written this. You're going to take from the rich, give to the poor. That's economic leveling. Didn't know Disney was putting economic thoughts in your head back when you were in elementary school. But it is. It's taking from the rich, giving to the poor. It's leveling out everybody so we all have the same, regardless of our contribution to the economy, which then gives us the question of, okay, well, how far do we go with the safety net? We talked about what a safety net was a couple of days ago. So this is the basis for a lot of our social programs. making sure that everybody is taken care of, making sure that nobody falls on hard times where they can't get up. And we talked about some of the pros and cons of that, where some safety net may be good, but maybe a temporary one, rather than letting them just hang out for a while. I already mentioned this idea here, taxing the rich and giving to the poor. Now, in the market solution, I created this long before he ever became president. So that's not a subliminal message there. Yeah, it looks quite different there. Now, in the market solution, we are going to have the wealth go to those who satisfy the needs of others. So if you can find an area in the economy where you can provide a service or a good that somebody else wants, then you deserve wealth. If you can't do this, if you can't find that place in the market, then you don't deserve wealth. Now, it doesn't mean we want you to be poor. That just means you might not be one of the elite and most wealthy people in the country. And people who are on the egalitarian fairness side of the argument would say, well, it's not fair that Bill Gates has so much in his house and he has so many things to do. And, I don't have a room. I don't have a room that's a trampoline room or a ball pit room in my house. Why does he get one and I don't? From what I heard, he does. Yeah, he's got a ball pit room for his kids or grandkids or somebody. Awesome. So cool. But if you can't provide a service to benefit the needs of others, then you don't deserve wealth, according to Market Solution. There's an idea here called libertarian fairness. Libertarian fairness says that we have the right to own and use property. You have the right to own and to use property without government interference. So you have the right to own and to use property without government interference, and you can use that to help meet the needs of others and build your wealth. But you have a personal responsibility to do that. And if you can't find a way to do that, then you don't deserve wealth. But it comes down to personal responsibility, the choices that you make, the way that you invest your money, or the way that you use your money and your resources to gain wealth. Last term here, economic Darwinism. Survival of the fittest in the economic world. That's the pure market solution. Is those that can provide wealth, or those that can provide goods and services to other people, they will be the ones to earn the wealth, they will be the ones to survive. The people who can't will forever be lower on the economic totem pole. Doesn't mean that they are going to have nothing. It just means that they're not going to be up here part of the elite class. So the question here with economic Darwinism is, why are we going to punish the productive members of society? Why would we take somebody like a Bill Gates or Elon Musk and say, we're going to take your hard-earned money and we're going to give it to somebody else. And nobody's going to say, you got to take over your bank account or we're going to take money out of your pocket. But they are going to say, we're going to tax you. You guys heard that back in the campaigns a year and a half ago? Let's tax the wealthy. They got plenty of money. Let's tax them and redistribute it to the lower income people. What are those people going to do if you continue to raise their taxes? They're what? They're not going to be wealth anymore. Okay, it's going to lead to egalitarian fairness, but what's their other option? What are they most likely going to do? If that's you, what are you doing? Yeah, but you're still going to be taxed based on your wealth. I'm leaving the country. I'm finding a country that does not charge me that high level taxes, which then means that what we were getting from those people is now totally gone. I showed you guys the video clip of the girl that wanted free education, right? Back in government. I thought I did. the girl who got onto Fox News and she was organizing a protest or a movement for free college education. And the guy asked her, well, how are we going to pay for that? Well, we're going to tax the wealthy 1% of the United States. And the guy said, okay, well, if we tax them to provide free education for everybody, what happens if they leave the country? She goes, well, there's always a 1%. Okay, so our 1% now becomes like the middle class. They're not going to have the money to be able to provide that education. It's a good video. I need to put a link to that for you guys to see later on. Helps us understand why